Rob is writing a book?
Yes. Sean and I and one other person are writing pro microservices with .NET 6. It's due out pretty early in the new year.
Nice.
Yeah. The hard part is we kind of had to write it with .NET 5 in mind because that's what we had as we were writing it. But we wanted it to come out right when .NET 6 landed. And so then they're tweaking stuff and we're like, I got to go fix my code samples. I got to go rewrite this chapter because it doesn't work that way anymore. So we got it done and it's a really cool book, but it was kind of interesting. It was quite the roller coaster ride to get it there.
Yeah, it's difficult. So
yeah. So thanks to A-Press for keeping our feet to the fire, or cursed be to A-Press for keeping our feet to the fire.
Well, and kudos to Rob for helping me out, because I'm the one that agreed to the whole contract thing, and then I hollered at Rob saying I need some help on this, and Rob jumped at the chance. So I appreciate you, Rob.
Yeah, definitely. It worked out really well. I'm glad we did it.
Yeah, me too.
Well, speaking of microservices with .NET 6, I got some cool stuff to show you about .NET 6. Now, here's the part where I tell you I am definitely going to post the slides on my site tonight, but with this talk, there are no slides. It is so much fun. This is minimal APIs with ASP.NET 6. We're going to upgrade a website from .NET 5 to .NET 6, and we'll see how minimal APIs work in that space. Pardon me. The code that we're going to build is online right now here up on GitHub, minimal APIs with ASP.NET 6. And each of the steps that we're going to do is a separate folder, so you can replicate how we got from here to there. And so when we get to the end, you can see that we've got that site already built. That URL, I'll put it in chat here. Code is right there. But if you want to get to it easier, or if you're watching this video later, head over to robrich.org, click on presentations, and here's minimal APIs with .NET 6, so you can get straight to the code. While we're looking at robrich.org, I'll click on About Me, and we can see this page, see some of the things that I've done recently. I'm a Cyril developer advocate. If you're struggling with your data mesh, I'd love to learn from you. I'm also a Microsoft MVP, Docker captain, and a friend of Redgate. We talked a little bit about AZ Give Camp. AZ Give Camp is so much fun. We start coding on Friday after work. Sunday afternoon, we deliver that completed code to the charities. Sleep is optional, caffeine provided. If you're in Phoenix, come join us for the next AZ Give Camp. Or if you'd like a Give Camp near you, hit me up on email or Twitter, and let's get a Give Camp in your neighborhood too. Some of the other things that I've done a lot with .NET. My first project was built in .NET Framework 1.0 in 2000. And one of the things I'm particularly proud of, I replied to a .NET Rocks podcast episode. They read my comment on the air and they sent me a mug. Woohoo! Now I kind of want to break out my Richard Campbell. And if you'd like no, I'm just kidding. So here's the code that we're going to build. And let's start out with this website. I've got a CS proj. Let's fire this up in VS Code. Show more options. Open with code. And let's go build ourselves a website. Now, the cool part about this is this CS proj, it's pretty easy to scaffold out, and it's really not all that complicated. Last time I did this talk, I just live coded all of those things, but there's really not much to it. It basically says it's .NET 6, and I've enabled a few options. Now, I've got this program.cs file that doesn't exist. Let's create a new file, and we'll call this program.cs. And let's go build a website. Oh, unable to open it. That's awesome. Let's come back to that one. Var builder equals web application dot create builder. And we'll pass in the args that you passed in on the command line. We'll say var app equals builder dot build. That's a capital B. Build. Then we will say app.run. And now we've got a website that will start up. Now, right now, it's going to do nothing. So let's tell it that we want to do something. Let's say app.mapGet. If you hit a slash, I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this function. I'll say return new. Actually, I don't need the return even. New. And I'll say message equals hello world. Well, I want to take it a little bit farther. I want to say hello name. So let's put a $sign in front of here. Now that's a parameter. Let's take this in string name. And now we can grab this as a query string. If we want to be explicit about this, we could say from query. And now we need one more using statement. Thank you, VS Code. There's my using statement. And now we're specifically grabbing this from the query string as opposed to a post body or other things. But if we left that off, then that would be fine too. Okay, so I want to give this a default equals world. I'll make it optional. Nope, that's not the way I do defaults. Okay, so let's start. This is how I would do default. World, there we go. Now let's start this up. So I'm here in this folder. I've got the program.cs, the site.cs proj, and let's say .NET run. Now, the cool part about that is I now have a website that is running. It's doing all of the serialization that I need for getting content off of the query string. It's going to spit out JSON data. Well, once it starts up. Looks like my machine is a little bit overloaded at the moment. And so it's going to spin up that website and do all the things. So here we go. Let's open up that website. And here we go. Hello world. I'm going to say, I would like to say name equals SEVDNUG. Hello, Southeast Valley.NET user group. I've got a real JSON response. If we take a look at the network, let's run that again. It's the response is application JSON. So we've got that right. We're processing query string. And we did all that in what? 4 lines of code? That's awesome. That is minimal APIs. Now, how did we get here? What's with the, we don't have a static void main. We don't have a program.cs. We don't have a namespace. Let's get from there to here. Now, I'm going to start out next with this ASP.NET 5 website. So let's open that up here in Visual Studio. I'm using Visual Studio 2022. And so let's dig into that one. I just live coded bare minimum, by the way. Let's open up this project here in Visual Studio and take a look around. Now, in Visual Studio or in ASP.NET 5, ASP.NET Core 5, I can upgrade Visual Studio. That's pretty cool. I love this. Update on close. That is amazing. Here in ASP.NET Core 5, we have 3 different paradigms that we can use for building websites. We have ASP.NET MVC, we have ASP.NET WebAPI, and we have Razor Pages. Now, the cool part about it is as we create a new project, we're prompted about which of those 3 templates that we want to use, but they're not mutually exclusive. So what I did here in this CS proj is in this site is I did all of them. Let's fire up this site and take it for a spin. Now, the cool part about this, because we have all 3 paradigms, we can kind of get a feel for how I might upgrade a website with just one of them. Now, you probably don't want to use all 3 in the same site, but it is definitely possible. ASP.NET MVC is great for pages that need some complexity. If you have more of a simple use case, then, I'm still running this. Let me shut that down. So, of course, this is going to fail. Maybe I got it in time. ASP.NET MVC is great for pages that need some complexity. If you're running more simple pages, then Razor Pages might be a good fit. And if you have primarily JSON APIs or maybe XML APIs, then WebAPI can be a good choice. But they're not mutually exclusive. Okay, so it looks like our website is running. Let's come back to here and fire it up. And now we have this ASP.NET Core 5 website that includes WebAPI, ASP.NET MVC, and Razor Pages all running together. So here's my home page. This is an MVC page. I have my About page. This is a Razor page. I have my weather forecast. This is a WebAPI page. And in fact, I have the Swagger details associated with that WebAPI page as well. So I like this because we can pop open this one. We can try it out. And we can go get the, it'll show us the curl that we need to be able to call this API and also the results that we get when doing so. That's pretty cool. So let's wander around this website a little bit and see all of the pieces. So with WebAPI, we have the weather forecast controller. And so this is the one that comes built in. I've moved it to /API just for convenience, but it just randomly generates weather details. And we've seen this before. That looks pretty straightforward. If we're in MVC, we might have a controller. Here's my home controller. And this home controller has an index view. So we can pop open into the views folder. And we can see my index view that says, hello. This references my layout page here inside my shared folder. So here's my layout. We could also take a look at the Razor Pages piece. Here in the Pages section, we have our About page. And the cool part about Razor Pages is it's kind of a much simpler paradigm, much like classic ASP or ASP.NET Web Forms, where I just have a URL and it maps specifically into that content. So wherever this About is inside the folder, that's the URL by default. And now I could choose to do some, for lack of a better term, code behind where I could do some additional processing. But at the point where we reach enough complexity for testing purposes, we probably want to move that to ASP.NET MVC. Now, how do these all work? Well, as we spin up each one, we have this program.cs. This program.cs will go create our host builder, and it will reference our startup file. Our startup file is where that magic happens, where we say, here's the content that we need in each site. So if I'm doing MVC, I have add controllers with views. I'll also now down here say use endpoints, and I'll specify the controllers. And so that's how I kick off the MVC part. How do I kick off the Razor Pages part? Well, I add Razor Pages, and I add this map Razor Pages. And now Razor Pages works. If I want to do WebAPI, I could map the controllers. Maybe I don't need to do views, but because controllers are controllers in ASP.NET 5, then it's not specific. So I just happen to say with views, so I would grab my MVC ones too. But then let's also rig up the Swagger content here, where we're specifying how we generate Swagger. And then here we're showing the Swagger UI page, but only in development, so that we won't leak those details into production if we don't want to. Now, the cool part about all of this is we just kind of put this all together into one site. They aren't mutually exclusive. We just built up our request pipeline where we wanted to say, use the developer exception page, then use Swagger and Swagger UI, then use HTTPS redirection, static files, routing, authorization, just the normal stuff, and then endpoints mapping into the various details. That's really cool. Now, you probably would not use all three at the same time, but as we upgrade this website from .NET 5 to .NET 6, then we can see how each of those pieces start to interact, which is why I kind of stuffed them all into one place. Any questions so far on this .NET 5 site? Awesome. So that was step 2 here, this step 1, this ASP.NET 5 site. Now let's upgrade it to .NET 6. Now we're going to get to the point where we can use minimal APIs, but we'll also wander through a bunch of other new things, both in C#10 and in .NET 6, We'll look at file scope namespaces, global using directives, automatic global usings, top level statements, async main, minimal APIs, parameter and dependency injection, and integration testing. That's a lot. Let's do it. So our first step is to upgrade this project to .NET 6. Now we could definitely come in here to the project properties and flip the drop down, but we could also just come into this CS proj and go from 5 to 6. And it is now a .NET 6 project. Now, as part of moving to .NET 6, we may have some Nuget packages that we need to update. So let's come in here, manage Nuget packages. Let's see if there's any .NET 6 updates. Oh, yeah, there's a new version of Swashbuckle that works for .NET 6. So let's update that. Yes. I've got some namespace issues, it looks like, probably from that intermingling time when I was flipping between the versions. Oh, I need to save the solution. Yep, I'll save the solution. Okay, so now we're in .NET 6. Now, if we do nothing else, we now have a site that, well, it runs a little bit faster because they've made the .NET runtime a bit faster as well. But this website works exactly the same. We can navigate through each of these pages. We can wander between Razor pages and MVC and WebAPI in the way that we always have been. But now that we're in .NET 6, then we just get more, better, faster. So if your only move to get from .NET 5 to .NET 6 is that, modifying the .NET version and upgrading your Nuget packages, then that is completely sufficient. Maybe that's the spot where you start. You start by updating the .NET version and then let it sit for a bit and make sure that it works without, leveraging any of the new C# 10 and .NET 6 features. But yep, here's our website running. And just like it did before, we've got our home page running in MVC. We've got our about page running in Razor pages. And we've got our weather forecast running in WebAPI. Cool. So that was pretty awesome. That was easy to get from .NET 5 to .NET 6. Now let's take advantage of some of those C# 10 and .NET 6 features. One of the things that they noticed as they were looking at .NET 6 is that the majority of our content only has a single namespace in it. Now, if you only have a single namespace, then you're indenting this 4 spaces, then your next method indents another 4 spaces, and then your content, so you're already in 12 spaces before you've accomplished any tasks. Can we remove some of that indenting? Let's do this. Now we also need to remove this end curly brace as well, but that is completely valid in C# 10. Now I probably want to unindent this a little bit now. And so now if I only have one namespace in that file, I can do my namespaces like this. That's kind of cool. Let's run around and do that to the rest of our classes. I'm going to do that here. Let's remove this curly brace. Let's grab this, unindent it one, remove that end curly brace. We have an about right here that we need to do. So let's go grab that. And we've got a program.cs. Let's do that here. And let's do that here with startup. Now, the cool part is we don't need to do it to all the files, but in this case, we're going to. If it makes sense for you to only do new files this way, then that totally works. Let's do this. Unindent it once. It looks like we also have some models here. Let's do that. And there we go. Let me go find namespace and make sure I did them all. I did. Okay, so jQuery has a namespace reference. That's interesting. Now that's cool. We won't run it again, but we will build it to validate that this builds successfully. And we can see that we have now one less level of indenting in all the places. That's kind of cool. Now, depending on your tab or space preference, maybe you didn't have that problem. But for those of us who indent with 4 spaces, we now have a little bit easier go of it. Well, that's pretty cool. Another thing that we see, let's flip over to this one, is that we have a whole bunch of these using statements that we use or don't use. As we create a new file, they're going to have, here's our error view model, and it usually has a bunch of usings stuck here at the top. We have here this one. And so we end up spending a lot of time adding and removing these using statements. Remove unnecessary usings. Wait, I just added something. Let me put them back. I wonder if we could collect these using statements into a central place. So let's do that. Now, there is no convention for this, or there is no requirement for this, but by convention, I'm going to call this global.cs. Now here in global, I'm not going to have any of this content. I'm just going to put using statements here. So let me grab all of these using statements, and I'm going to move them here to global.cs. Now, if I want a using statement to be global across my project, I can say global. And now that using statement will take effect in every file in my project. Okay, let's do that here. Let's do that here. Let's do that. And here's where I try and remember this multi-cursor. Nope, that isn't it. Is it that? There we go. There we go. So now we've got this global using across all of the things. And so let's go grab the usings here and copy them into place. I like this because, or let's cut that. I like it as I set them into place because once we've got all the globals in front, it'll say, hey, I've already got that one. So for example, I already know that I've got system in there, but let's go grab about. What usings do you have? There's some. Let's put those in there. What usings do you have? I've already got system. Very nice. What usings do you have? Let's collect all of these and set them inside here. And let's go grab your usings as well and set them in here. And I love that it's telling me that it's already used some of them. So let me say, I'm going to go find the beginning of the line and put global in front of it. And then, oh, let me turn on regular expressions. There we go. And then I'm also going to replace global with only one global. There we go. Now I've already got this one, so I can remove those. Let me remove that one and that one, all of the green underlined ones that it's saying, hey, I already got that.
Hey, Rob.
Now these are, yep.
Sorry to interrupt. Would you anticipate doing this for all your projects and all your using statements? Because the way I've kind of looked at it is the ones that are most common across the board, like system collection, system link, maybe the extensions I would, but I don't anticipate going and using every single using statement and putting them here.
I agree. It might be a great place to collect those that you use frequently. If ever there's any ambiguity between two, like this library imports a class named logger and this library imports the class named logger, you don't want to global using both of those. And so if ever there's that ambiguity, then you might choose to do something. So if you have a particular class that is very specific to one particular task and it's the only place that is using that, then maybe I wouldn't put it in the global using. But I kind of like pooling it into the global using. So I really haven't found a place where I'm like, yeah, I really wish I hadn't put that using there. It just makes the rest of my code a little bit cleaner. Great point, though. You know, preferences will definitely vary here. I like that. Looks like that should be a resharper option. Collect usings. Good call. Okay, so we got all of our usings here. Now there might be some. Oh, let's build. Make sure everything builds. And let me go find all of the usings. Make sure I've collected them all. Yep, I have some in CSHTML files, but that's it. Now, that's really cool, but there's some that every project everywhere starts to include every time. You know, system, system.link, system threading tasks, maybe some ASP.NET stuff. And wouldn't it be cool if, say, I don't know, Microsoft like automatically included those usings? Let's pop open our CS proj and let's add a new option. We do have the enable nullable reference types option added by default if we started a .NET 5 or later project. But let's also add another one that is implicit usings. Now, if you create a .NET 6 project, then this option will automatically get added to your CS proj. But if you're upgrading a .NET 5 project or earlier, then this option didn't exist. So you're not going to break your code by updating it. But now that we have this in place, let's build it again and pop open that folder. Here in the obj folder, we can take a look at this and we get, is it in here? Or maybe it just hadn't built yet. Or maybe I need to rebuild.
I think it's in the .NET 6 folder.
Oh, it's in the .NET 6 folder?
I think so. Go to debug .NET 6.
Yeah, there it is. Site dot. Nope, it's not assembly info. Global usings, there it is. Because we enabled this this implicit usings file, it automatically generated this based on the details of this project type. So this is a web project type, and therefore we get automatically all of these using statements. Now we may not use all of them, but let me set this inside of my file here. And the beauty there is then it will highlight all of the ones that are now duplicated that I can remove. So let's remove all of these and remove all of these. And now I'm going to delete this so that it will only use the auto-generated ones. But the beauty here, because we now have this automatically generated, we don't even need to add any of these those using statements in any of our classes or in our global.cs either. So even if I didn't want to use the global CS, I still wouldn't need a using system at the top. So whether we're using system or not, that isn't necessary. Now, if there's ever a place where two different libraries would import the same named class, then Microsoft will definitely not include that in the automatically generated one, and you shouldn't include it in your global CS either. But if they can make a deterministic view of that content, then it will automatically pull in those usings in a really elegant way and allow you to now not have to worry about those usings at all. I like to pull the rest of my usings here, but those things are automatically generated just by turning on this implicit usings flag. That was cool. Okay, now one other thing, if we create a new .NET 6 project, we'll have a brand new startup experience. Here in .NET 5, we have this create host builder, and the host builder creates a bunch of startup stuff. Here in the startup file, we have these 3 sections. We have the constructor, we have the configure services piece, and we have the configure method. Configure services will fill our IOC container, our dependency injection, and then configure defines our pipeline. But we could create a new, we could upgrade to a new mechanism, much like we did with the other one. So let's delete the static void main, the public class, the namespace, and just create content. So we could have something like this, where we say host builder and then .build and .run. That's interesting, but let's upgrade that even farther to use the new builder. So I'm going to say var builder equals web application dot create builder, and I'll take in the args that we passed in from the command line. I'm going to say var app equals builder dot build, and then I'm going to say app dot run. Ooh, I love that IntelliSense. That's cool. Now, we haven't specified the startup.cs. We could definitely say here app dot, nope, builder dot startup, nope, builder dot, what is it? I've forgotten what it is. It might even be on the app where we can specify that startup and it will go interrogate that. But instead, let's go grab those sections. So here is configure services, fill our IOC container. And then here we'll have the configure pipeline content. So let's go dig into this startup.cs. And here's our configure method. So let's go get our IOC container first. Here's our IOC container content. So let's set that in place right here. Now, we don't have a services. We could definitely say var services equals builder.services, or we could just take it a step further and say, let's go replace all of our service references with builder.services. I think you can also simplify this down to this. Yeah, that worked. Nice. Now let's go grab from here the build pipeline. So I'm going to grab all of this content here, and we'll set that in place here. Now, we've built the app. We don't have the env, so let's say app.environment to go grab that content. I think, nope, we can't. We might be able to simplify that. I'm going to leave it. And we could also, instead of doing this endpoints game, we could just say app.mapControllerRoute. And now we can delete this, and we can delete our startup.cs. Now, the cool part is we have that same mechanism. We're filling our IOC container, we're creating our pipeline. All of the same processes are there. We just now did it in one class instead of 2. Now, if you do like that separation, you can definitely use the old one, or, and I'm bummed that I can't find it. App.startup. Nope, that's not it. It's a builder option that is just really cool. Builder dot configure services dot add startup. I need to go find it because it's just really cool where you can just hand it your startup.cs, and if you want to move those into other places, you definitely can. Or you could create just a static method somewhere, so you could just say builder.ioc and go do all of the other things that you wanted to. So now we've got this pipeline, and we did a couple of things as we did this as well that I also want to call out. There is no using statement here at the top. There is no public class, public program class. There is no static void main. All of those things are generated for us when we choose this option of just having an inline static void main method. Now we can use using statements here. So using system, and that will automatically work as expected as well. But it does behind the scenes create a program.cs and a public static void main inside that program.cs. So it's not like those constructs are gone. They're just generated for us by the compiler. Cool. So we moved to the new builder. Now the new builder isn't required, but it's kind of nice. Now we've mapped controller routes. We've mapped Razor pages. So we get all of our web API and MVC pieces, and we got our Razor pages pieces. Now, what if we did something like this? app.map.get minimal, or no, API/minimal. And we want to grab string name and have that return new message. Hello, name world. Cool. We just stuck a minimal API into a site that includes Razor pages, MVC, and web API. Now, this one very specifically is mapping the get and pulling in a query string. We could make that optional. We could also specifically say this is from query like we did before. Alternatively, we could just let it go figure out where it's from. Let's do a similar thing, but let's say app.map_post. Now, in this case, our first argument is the URL. So let's say API/minimal. And let's give it some arguments. So 1 and 2. And now in our function that we create, we can just pass in string 1, int 2, and those are just arguments into this function. Now, perhaps in this function, we might want to do a little bit more. So we might want to say if 2 is less than 1, then return not found. Wait a minute. When we had a controller, we had kind of these helper methods that were really nice. Now we just have some random function out in the middle of nowhere. And we also may want to say, if it's good, then let's say return OK. Well, we do have these helper methods now that are really cool. We can say results.notfound. And this results class is a static class that allows us to be able to do interesting things. We could also say results.statuscode of 404 or results.error. No, results.created. Now that'll give us a 201, and then we would pass a URL here. We can do all of these types of responses, or we can just return the results that we need to. And our Lambda will just figure out the content that we need to return. So that's pretty cool. Now, this one was a post, but we didn't specify where this content was coming. So let's take in a obj data. And so now here in this OK, let's also say this object data. I'm going to return a new object that has a message. Hello world. Nope, let's say hello 1 and 2. Let's put the $sign in front of there. And let's also say data equals data. Or we can shorten this just to say, go grab the data, please. Okay, so if you didn't pass in a number that was big enough, we're returning not found. Otherwise, we're returning this new object with some data in it. We're grabbing those query string parameters and setting into place. That's pretty cool. App.map put. Maybe this one we say we've got API minimal. This is where you're creating something. So we'll take in a object data. And in this case, I'm just going to say return results dot created. I save this to the database at /API/minimal/1 2. And now that is saved in the database. Oh, and I need to pass in the value data. There we go. Now, all of the things that we did in this minimal API are kind of cool. You know, they're in line here, which that'll get us done. Oh, I see a cool comment from Mike about using the startup class. Yeah, exactly. Thanks, Mike, for that. If I wanted to come in here, I could also say var startup equals new startup and pass in builder dot configuration, and then I could say startup dot configure services, passing in nothing, and then I could say var app equals startup equals builder dot build, and then startup dot configure, passing in other things like app dot environment, and then app dot run. And so if you really like your startup class, that is a really elegant way to do it. Thanks, Mike. I'm going to comment this out so that it still builds though. Cool. So we just built a minimal API over into our project. We're now using all 4 paradigms. We're using ASP.NET MVC, we're using WebAPI, we're using Razor Pages, and we now have our minimal API in place. But that's kind of messy. We just, you know, if I have a bigger API, maybe I have 5 or 8 different URLs, and I have 2 or 3, 4 methods on each one. That kind of gets messy. Let's see if we can add a little bit more structure to this. So I'm going to create a new model. Let's add a class, and I'm going to call this minimal model. And minimal model will take in public minimal model. It will take in nothing. Oh, in that case, I'm just not going to do that at all. Public string message get set. Public minimal model data. I could also use a record for this, and we'll come back to that because that'll be really fun. But now I've got this. Oh, yes, you need it to be initialized or nullable. So let's make that one. Let's actually declare this one as nullable. But let's say this one is init. And now we'll make, nope, that's must have get accessors. So get and init, and now it'll be happier. No, you really do want that to be nullable. Okay, fine, that's nullable. Nullable reference types are fun, right up until they're not. Okay, now I'm going to create a new folder, and I'm just going to add this folder. I'll call this APIs. That's a horrible name, but you know, it is what it is. Oh, it looks like I already have an APIs folder there. Yep. Okay, so not a great folder name, but it'll get it done. Let's add a new class, and we'll call this minimal.cs. And here inside minimal, we might want to come grab some, where's program.cs? We probably want to centralize this part a little bit. So let's yank all of those out of there and set them in here. So now I have this, this method. Let's call this public results get, and it does that. No, this doesn't return a results. This returns a minimal model. There we go. So we'll return a new minimal model. And there's that method. Return. There you go. Oh, this is now capitalized. That's cool. There we go. And now it can turn it into a Lambda. Thank you. There we go. Now let's do a similar thing. Public void post. And post is going to do this process. So it won't return void. It will instead return a results. And if I remember right, this is a go to definition. It's all mad because my code doesn't compile yet. So let's come back in here and see where that, what type that is returning. iResult, there we go. So back here, I'm going to return an iResult. And now it can do all of those pieces of this method. There we go. Nope, one more. There we go. Now this is a new minimal model. This is now capitalized, and so is this, which also means this is equals data, and this is also a minimal model. Now that looks like it'll work correctly. Perfect. Let's also go get the put. And so the put is pretty simple here. Let's say public void put, and put is going to do, not that. It's going to do that. Public void put. Now it's going to take in a minimal model, and it's going to return an iResult. We don't need that, and that, and that. Data is not null here. You are correct. Okay, so I've got a bunch of mess down here, and that's probably why it's mad. Cool. We now have a class that does all of the things. Oh, I need to close curly there. Now let's initialize this. Let's create public void initialize. And let's take in an app. Now this app is of type web application, so that works out well. Let's say take in a web application app, and here we will map get to get, and we will map post to post, and we will map put to put, and we have now initialized this class. So back here in our program.cs, we could come in here and we could say minimal equals new minimal. Ooh, we need a new using. Okay, let's come out here and let's grab this and set it into our global usings. Global using that. Apparently I can't spell using. There we go. Now we don't need to specify that using here in program.cs, and we have our minimal min.initialize and pass in app. And now we've done that. Well, this could be kind of interesting. What if we instead use dependency injection for this? So let's say app.services.get required service of type minimal. And now we know that that service will exist. And if, for example, this thing took in a public minimal, if we had some dependency injection here, like an iLogger of minimal logger, then that will still work correctly because we are grabbing it from dependency injection, which means all of the dependencies will be filled. Now that was kind of cool. We added a bit more structure to our web API or to our minimal API. And now we just need to do this. We could even shorten this if we wanted to say, go get me the thing and dot initialize it. And we did all of that work. And arguably, this looks like a controller. So here's my pitch is that if you get to that level of structure, minimal API may not be a great fit. You might want to just flip over to MVC or Web API and use that there. We did a lot to add a lot more structure, but we basically just recreated Web API, and that's totally fine. So now let's take a look at testing. Well, one of the big critiques of minimal APIs is that they are kind of not testable. How do I flex these methods if they're all just in line here in my program.cs? Now we made it a little bit easier to unit test because we separated them out into this separate class. But wouldn't it be cool if we could unit test our minimal APIs, or even better, integration test our minimal APIs? Now I said early on that we created these minimal APIs, or rather here in program.cs, it automatically generated for us a program class and a static void main method in it, but that program.cs is private. So we could say public partial class program, and we've now told our program.cs to make this a public method that we could now get at from unit tests. That's pretty cool. So let's switch over to a project where I have the unit tests already in, or I've separated those two projects into separate pieces. So let's come here, open this project or solution, and take a look at this testing. Now, it is the exact same project that we built before. We've separated minimal into this separate thing, argument null exception. That is pretty cool. And so all of the pieces are exactly the same. I did create a iHello service, which was kind of interesting. This one is the one that is responsible for making this default name, which is kind of cool. But now we want to be able to test this. Here in program.cs, we said public partial class program. And now I'm going to create this fixture. Now it descends from web application factory of program being that website that I want to test. And now I'm able to create this fake site. Now I could pass in environment details. I'm going to default it to development, but then we could choose to override various services. So maybe I want to add a mock data store instead of the real data store. In this case, I'm going to use the real data store because I think that's pretty cool. So let's fire up a minimal API test. Now I'm going to start by creating a new instance of that site app. Now I have my application. I'm going to say application.createClient. That gives me this web API client, or HTTP client rather. And now I can just fire random requests at that client and be able to get at that response, deserialize that response into the body that I expect. It might be null. And now start to do some assertions on that body. So if I call /minimal/API (name equals test), I expect when it calls this API with name equals test, then that message that comes back here, here in my integration, my greet service will say hello test. So back here in my thing, I want it to say hello test. And so I'll validate that that's the way it is. Where did this 3 come from? here in my minimal model, no, not here. Here in minimal.cs, I just happen to set ID equals 3. Okay, that's dumb, but maybe if I passed in a thing, that would be the case. So here's my integration test of my minimal API. That's pretty cool. Here's my test of the post service that's doing a similar thing, but it's actually constructing a body and flinging that off into my post service. I have, and I love this assertion scope here in XUnit, because now I'm running all of these assertions, and if any of them throw, my test will still fail, but it will try to run all of them to make sure that I don't just stop at one error and then fix that error and then hit the next one. The bummer part is I have this one assertion that said should not be null, but this presumes that this model is not null. So I have to actually say argument null exception go validate, and that tells .NET, yep, it really isn't null. Now, this cool mechanism of creating these integration tests by creating this instance of the site and overriding it with any mock services that we need could be really cool. And let's do a similar thing to test this weather forecast controller. Now, here in the weather forecast controller, we're going to generate some random data. So we can't, for example, validate what weather we're going to get, but we can validate that we're going to get 5 of them. So here's our weather integration test. We're going to go create a new instance of the site. We'll create our HTTP client from that, and then we'll just fire the request at that and validate that we have 5 weather requests coming back from that. We didn't get null. We didn't get an empty list. We got 5 count out of that, that API. That's a great integration test. Similarly, we could use this for, if we wanted, that's an integration test. If we wanted to do a unit test of this weather API, then we could just instantiate it and go call the method directly. Now, we do have to do some interesting things about mocking the dependencies. So AutoMocker might be a great way where we can just say, these are the ones that we want to specifically mock, and AutoMocker can take care of newing the rest of them, which is pretty cool. Now, I didn't use AutoMocker in this case, but this is a unit test inside ASP.NET Core 6, and this is an integration test inside of ASP.NET Core 6. And they're really not all of that weird or different, or one longer than the other. This wasn't always the case, and now that is just so simple, it is amazing. So we got the hang of testing here inside of .NET 6, and that was really cool. But we also talked about how this probably isn't the right size for an API. Instead, if we want to use a minimal API, let's take a look at one that might be the right size. Here's where WebAPI kind of shines. Now, I have a project where I have this JSON file, and I just want to create some API that surfaces this JSON file. Now, I don't want to do anything else fancy with this JSON file. I just want this interesting config to be available from a URL. That's a perfect place for minimal APIs. So here's our minimal API where we'll do our builder, we'll fill our IOC container. And so let me add Swagger. And then we could do this in an extension method, go get the interesting config and add it to our IOC container. In this case, I just did it in line because it's kind of nice to have exactly one CS file in my project. But I did do it inside of curly braces to make sure that these variables don't leak. Now we'll do a builder.build, and now we have our pipeline. If it's development, I want to use Swagger. And if it's not, then I want to use my regular error handler pages. This is actually redundant. It's automatically injected anyway, but I kind of like specifying it. I still get HTTPS redirection. I'm mapping my get. If you hit my slash page, then you will get that configuration, automatically serialize this JSON. And because I wanted this interesting config to be a strongly typed class, here is a public record that specifies all of the properties that I want in this class. Now, this record class is not that unlike saying public class interesting config. and saying public string thanks. Well, in this case, it's a lowercase t, I think. And no, it is an uppercase t. And then doing that for each of the properties, but I just did it in one line, which was pretty cool. Now, because every API needs some documentation around it, I have the Swagger content. And because every API needs some health checks, I've added health checks in there too. So I just added the health checks into my IOC container. And I also added the health checks into here, where I just said map health checks to the URL /health. I also did error checking. So if you hit /error, I'll give you a 500. And if you hit any other URL, I'll also give you a 404. Now, the interesting thing here is I probably want to give you a little bit more message here. So new message equals not found, status equals 404. Otherwise, it's like, wait, what am I getting? Is that the browser? So I'll just give you a little bit of extra context. Now, this is probably the right size for a minimal API. I've got health checks, I've got documentation, I've got logging, and I've just got that one little thing that I need to do. Let's fire up this web API and take it for a spin. Now, the cool part here is we have our main API, our purpose, to be able to surface this one page or just accept one post, maybe accept a post from our website and send off that email or capture that one thing and log it. But because I've got Swagger in place, let's come here into this and try it out. Let's execute. And yep, I've got my config file ready to go, and I can now consume it in any application. But this being a web API, I want to make sure that if I error, I get my proper 500 error. That's cool. And if I go to some random page, then I get my proper 404. We could also come here into /health, and we get interesting metrics. In this case, this site is healthy. And so if I'm running this inside of a container, then Docker can monitor that health page, validate that I'm getting a 200 every time, and restart my container if ever that page is unhealthy. I'm also going to add another thing. Oh, status code doesn't give me a body. So that is kind of more of a right size ASP.NET minimal API, but I could also say public partial class program. And now that I've made this class public, now I can do those same tests, integration tests against all of these methods. Now I can't do unit tests because the methods aren't exposed externally, but I can do integration tests to validate that maybe if I inject a fake config file that I can get the values that I need. This is kind of that right size for minimal APIs, but minimal APIs is not exclusive to ASP.NET 6. We can still intermingle it with WebAPI or MVC or Razor pages when it makes sense. If you just need to string in that one extra little thing without a whole lot of ceremony, minimal APIs can be perfect. So that's upgrading a project from ASP.NET Core 5 to ASP.NET Core 6, and also a tour through minimal APIs. Any thoughts or concerns or questions in this project?
I have a question about global using. Is there any downside to as far as memory usage and memory efficiency when using global usings?
Is there any downside to global usings? Mm-hmm. There is not. It is purely a compiler trick.
Okay. So that begs the question, why wasn't it done that way from the beginning?
Yeah, good question. They were specifically focusing on trying to make less ceremony in this version. And I saw Scott Hunter and Jeff Fritz talked through this at Dev Intersection last week, where they said they were contemplating this when they rebooted .NET from .NET Framework to .NET Core, but they didn't want to change too much of the API service. But now that we're kind of in this .NET 5 and .NET 6 era, then it's kind of time to make those efficiency gains. Not efficiency, but rather simplicity gains, because now we've got global classes without any ceremony there. We've also got a whole lot less indentation. And so if we need these extra features, they're definitely available. But yeah, I'm kind of with you. When they were moving from .NET Framework to .NET Core, that might have been the time to add all these, or maybe even before that.
Yeah,
Rob,
if
can
there's
I add
no
one thing to that?
downside, why not? Yeah.
Definitely, Joe.
While there's no downsides to it, there could be potential issues with using global usings. I think Rob alluded to it earlier. When you have two potential namespaces or two potential classes in two different namespaces, it could cause collisions if you do that, where your code could, like if you're accessing a logger class in one namespace versus another, it could cause confusion. The other thing, if you're not consistent with where you put your global usings, for some newer engineers to your project, they could get lost. Like, how is this magically working when there's no using statements in it?
Yeah, I want my crutch here. Go put my crutch back. Where is your voodoo magic coming from? Yeah. And that's why I think that global.cs is a good convention. They very specifically did not require it. So I could have put these anywhere. I could have put them in this file. I could have put them in the top of my program.cs. But wherever you do it, be consistent about those usings. Either put the majority of them in your global one, or don't use it at all, or identify those ones that you want to make global. And then in places where there is some ambiguity between a using, then that using probably should be in the specific file so that you can avoid that ambiguity.
You can also
Great
put
point.
them in the project file too, if you want, as another place of consistency. You don't have to put it in a class, but you can add them, kind of like what Rob was showing with the implicit usings. You can add a project group with those global usings in there.
You can, but I would never go looking for using statements in a CS proj. So all else being equal, just because you can probably doesn't mean you should.
No, I agree.
Can I ask a quick question about the global.cs file? So
Definitely.
I get it, and I've seen it other places, but is that name now special, or could I use common.cs, for example, and then put global using in that?
Yeah, I chose to name it global, but there's nothing magic about that name. You could name it whatever you want, or even put it in whatever folder you want. The only thing C# is looking for is the word global before using.
I
and
see.
so I could put it here. I could put it here.
In theory, you could have it in
there.
like 17 different files if you wanted, but that kind of defeats the purpose of it.
Okay,
Yeah.
Great. Thank you.
And blog post authors, please make sure to include them somewhere visible in the blog posts. We know what namespace you're referencing in your sample code.
Yes, exactly. Don't bury these.
Hey, Rob, I got a question.
I feel like,
Yes.
like that was a dig, Barry, in some way, shape, or form.
It was not. It took Microsoft a long time to actually figure out how to do it well, but I think they have it now in their code samples. But for a long time, I just didn't even use them because I would, I got so frustrated by blog posts and there were a lot of them that didn't have it, and I'm like, well, what do I need to bring in here?
Yep.
Oh yeah, I forgot to tell you about that Nuget package you have to install first. That gives you access to, and then your control dot works. And man, just tell me what I need to do. Yeah, I agree. Sorry to
So,
interrupt. There was another question that was coming in.
yeah, how would you configure authentication for this? Because that's always kind of a little bit tricky. You know, maybe a custom policy that requires a bearer token in the header. So
I've got this use authorization statement right here. And so I've already kind of got the beginnings of authentication, but I can say inside of a particular minimal API, and I've got this broken out in a weird spot, dot allow anonymous or dot require authorization. And in the same way that we can decorate our controllers with allow anonymous or require authentication, that same mechanism here in minimal APIs is just dangling methods off the back end. All else being equal, I wish it was here, but that would take effect on this map get method, not on this get method. So it's like, okay, fine. I get why you had to put it down here. That was a great question.
I have one more quick question.
Yeah.
If you go to your program CS, and you go to the top where like the first line, where you have web application create builder. What if you wanted to have your own file called create custom host builder, where based on maybe a couple environmental variables, you want to configure different, host environments set up. I know in 5, the var builder, builds on host builder, and this is web application. How would you do that?
You could use the old one. So I host builder. Let me see if I got that instance pulled up. This program.cs still works in ASP.NET Core 6. Oh, are you not going to let me open it? Oh, because I've already got one open with that name. Thanks. Oh, because I ripped it out from under it. Let me go to where I haven't changed it yet. This one still works, this create host builder, and all of the different doohickeys around configuring different things. But in the majority of cases where I was using this, it's now actually possible to do that with this mechanism. And so either filling in the IOC details, or now I'm configuring it based on data that I pulled out of my configuration and triggering or configuring various Kestrel details. I've not needed to walk away from this one, but this still works. And so, we kind of doodled with, what if I did, and I'll just set this back in place so that we can see it. What if I did something like this? Var builder equals dot build, or actually, no, that's just the builder. So we could just go like that. And now we're doing it the old way. And this builder are pretty much identical, kinda. It's going to get mad because I now have two. But then when I get to builder.build, then I would need to call into my, it's actually using startup. So I could just say var app equals that dot build. And I could even say then app dot run, or just dot run straight away there. And so not even setting this at all. If that is more the way you want to start it up, then you could definitely do that inside of ASP.NET Core 6 as well. Yeah, I'm going to comment this out because it's going to get mad at me in a second for starting up 2 web servers. But they worked hard to go try and figure out all the things that we were doing here and make them available this way instead.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah. Builder.use startup. No, it's all mad. There was a really cool way though, where you could just pass in a startup like this. And I wanted to say it was just builder.use startup. Maybe I'm missing a using. But it was something as easy as that. And I don't have a startup class. Oh, there it goes. And that was one way to be able to pull in the startup class without having to flatten it this way. But if it makes sense to flatten it, then it's just right there. It's pretty cool.
Cool.
I think ASP.NET 6 is such a fun place to be. Now that we have this 4th paradigm where all 4 of them can play simultaneously at the same time, it's pretty cool. We have lots of choice to be able to craft the things that we want to. And also, what I find particularly interesting, and let me go pull up the version before I started refactoring them. Actually, I'll pull up this one. This feels really Node-like. If you've ever used Node and Express, it's like, yeah, that's pretty cool.
I think that's one of the goals that they were doing with this too, is to have a bit of commonality with other programming languages. And when you have commonalities such as like this, like when you're talking about with Express and Node, etc., then you have an easier adoption of people wanting to play with C# and ASP.NET Core. So it helps provide it as a yet another option in the tool belt or in the toolbox to build with.
Right.
So Rob, there is a template for F# for the minimal API stuff, just in case anybody's curious.
Oh, that's awesome. I'm trying to figure out how to return both status code and content, and I'm failing. Oh, one of the other things that I found really annoying, and let me just show you this because it was kind of awkward. When I'm creating a new project, I cruised up and down this list for a good long time looking for minimal APIs. And I'm like, no, show me the minimal API. Here's ASP.NET Core Web App. That's Razor Pages. Here's ASP.NET Core Model View Controller. If we scroll down a little bit, we get to WebAPI. And it's like, where is the minimal one? So I type in minute and it's like, nope. Minimal APIs are kind of based on APIs. So if you pull up the ASP.NET Core Web API template, and then I'll give it a name. That sounds like a really good name. I'm not sure why I'm creating it there though. Here in the Web API details, I have this use controllers. And if I uncheck it, it's a minimal API project. And if I check it, it's a Web API project. I find that to be just a dizzying silliness. I wish they had actually created a completely separate template, all else being equal. But if you want to scaffold out a minimal API project, that's how you do it.
I think they were trying to avoid yet another template because there's already like 40,000 templates when you do .NET New.
Well, that's another thing that they did pretty cool is .NET New now only shows, and here's some that you might want to choose from. If you do .NET New list, it will show you all the things that you have installed. But yeah, there's a lot. That was a great point though, because you can install your own too. And so this list will just keep getting longer and longer. But even here, if you say .NET new web API, then there's a dash minimal or dash use dash minimal dash APIs that allows you to scaffold out a minimal API project with .NET new as well. But it is, unfortunately, baked into the web API template. Oh, I just opened that one. Let me go back to the other one. You know something that'll really blow your mind? Wouldn't it be cool if you could say, yeah, you can return views for minimal APIs. That isn't quite the right syntax because, you know, I have to say new view result, and I have to actually give it a name because I'm not inside of a controller, so it can't inspect the thing to get all the things. And I think I need to pass in more properties. But, and am I missing? I think I'm missing a using or something to help it with finding it, but it's, yeah, you can return views from minimal APIs as well.
Something I find neat about minimal APIs is if I'm going to build out a microservice and I just want, say, 1 or 2 entry points, just 1 or 2 methods, right? And or maybe I'm doing an AWS Lambda with a single entry point, or maybe an Azure function, right? And I just want, I want to skip the convention, right? I don't have to have a folder structure. I don't have to have that, right? You know, where you're building things out for convention. I just want to have something with minimal code, and less code makes it easier to support as well. So minimal APIs really helps in that regard.
Yeah, a completely flat project where you have no folders at all, and you have the program.cs and maybe a model file and maybe one other business processing file all just in one folder. That's pretty cool. And then mark it as public partial, and now all of your integration tests will work real well there too.
Good stuff, Rob.
Thanks. Minimal APIs are so much fun. I wish we had time to write another chapter.
I'm sure APRETS will be looking for us for a next version very soon.
Yeah, version 2 of this book, or I guess it'll probably be version 7 by then, will be really sweet.
Yeah, I would not doubt it if they do hit us up so we can hit a .NET 7 and you know we'll see what else we actually need to add to it. But
yeah. Well, this is a lot of fun. I've had a blast getting to show you ASP.NET Core 6. The code is online right now. Let me post this in chat as well. Code
Maybe you and Mike could tweet out the links after we get off.
Ooh, definitely. And a picture of you and the cat. But if you're watching this later and you want to find me, hit me up on Twitter. There's my Twitter handle, or email. My Twitter is @Rob_Rich, and I would love to continue the conversation because minimal APIs are so much fun.